Basically, we have a waste problem. I think all the problems, the crises that we're facing uh, come back to a waste issue. We are creating vast quantities of waste. And since the 1970s, our capacity to create waste has absolutely exploded. In 1970, just in relation to mining, we were mining about 25 billion tons of material every year. So in 1970, about 25 billion tons of material. And by 2020, we were mining 100 billion tons of material. And to get to this so-called green transition, it's estimated that we'll need to mine about 170 billion tons of material by 2050. So that's basically the mass of Mount Everest. Mount Everest is about 175 billion tons of material. No environment can survive that behavior. As a result of this extraction from the planet, we have multiple crises. It's not just a climate crisis. We have an impending water crisis, soil crisis, chemical pollution crises. And 90%, at least 90% of this, and when it comes to technology, 99% of what we dig out of the earth turns into toxic waste, not just normal waste, but toxic waste. In other words, waste that will kill people it touches, will kill animals, will kill birds, will poison the water, will poison the soil, is kept in what are called tailing dams, tailing dumps that are constantly collapsing around the world at this moment in time. Digital waste is the fastest growing waste stream in the world. And in a typical dump, e-waste will represent somewhere in the region of 70 to 80% of the toxicity in that dump. So the most dangerous parts of the dump, 70 to 80% of them are driven by e-waste. We don't notice a lot of this e-waste because we dump it in poor countries. Whether we're in Ireland or the UK or Denmark, we have all these secret ways of moving our waste away from Europe or North America to the global south. It's estimated there's something like 18 million children and 13 million women involved in the so-called recycling of e-waste around the world. This is an example of the recycling where young teenagers are burning computer cables in order to get some copper or other metals out of them. And you can imagine how good that smoke is for your lungs if you're inhaling it for a couple of days or a couple of weeks. So we have a massive and growing doubling problem with e-waste. As I said, it's the fastest growing waste stream, over 50 million tons last year. That's enough to build the Great Wall of China. And in another 10 years, we'll be able to build 2 Great Walls of China. So e-waste is growing at a phenomenal rate. The vast majority of it is not recycled. About 17% of e-waste is recycled. And of that 17%, we get back about 30% of reusable materials. So the effective circular economy of electronics is about 5%. So 95% goes as a toxin into the actual atmosphere, where it will pollute for hundreds, if not thousands of years, the water and the actual soil. And it's designed this way as well. This is not a bug in the system. This is a feature of the modern electronics industry. Planned obsolescence, designed for waste. Products are designed not to last, to create this constant overconsumption frenzy that has really exploded since the 1970s. So e-waste, 50 million tons per year. So this is probably the most scary thing I have discovered probably in my life, right? This fact here. I don't know if you'll find it scary. I find it absolutely, truly scary. Modern humans have been around for about 200,000 years, somewhere in that territory. And it was calculated the total CO2 impact of modern humans. And that of that total impact, 25% of it we caused up until 1975. So from 200,000 years ago to 1975, 25% of all the CO2 damage that we had done to the atmosphere. In the next 20 years, another 25%. So it took us 200,000 years to get to the first 25% of CO2 damage. And within another 20 years, we had done the equivalent amount of CO2 damage. And between 1995 and 2020, we did another 50%. So 75% of the CO2 damage we have done to the planet, we have done in essentially 50 years. Things are becoming exponential in relation to our behaviours. And the vast majority of this damage occurs by middle class people and upwards in the process. The top 10% do something like 60% of the overall damage. It's the rich lifestyle. It's not the poor people who are doing this damage. It's the people with multiple devices and a couple of cars, etc., and all those luxuries of the modern world. It's interesting when you track the growth of high tech, the growth of our modern, wonderful technological world, and the growth of basic CO2. They almost identically map each other. In the 70s, the high-tech industry really took off. And in essence, high-tech technology is the secret accelerant of all the crises that we are facing today, whether it is global warming or the soil crises or the water crises, or the fact that we have destroyed about 70% of biodiversity in the last 50 years. 10,000 years ago, we represented 3% of the mass of mammals. Today, we and our livestock represent 97%. So 10,000 years ago, we were 3%, the other 97% was wildlife. Today, we are 97%, about 67% for our livestock, 30% for our own weight, and 3% for the wildlife. That's the impact. And most of that impact has occurred in a fractional period of time. So we're wonderful at lying to ourselves. That seems to be one of our most strongest attributes. The more intelligent we become, the greater we become at telling lies and pretending that things don't really exist. What a wonderful marketing phrase we have about cloud, that it's all in the cloud. Well, the cloud is in the ground, on the ground. And the cloud in 2022 was about 70 million servers, 70 million big computer servers, storing about somewhere in the region of 10 zettabytes of data. Each one of these servers consumes or creates between 1 and 2 tons of CO2 to manufacture, and will probably create about 2 tons of CO2 through its energy use as well. But in the commercial environment, about 50% of the total CO2 impact occurs within the manufacturing phase, so for heavy use electronics. But in the public area, the consumer area, it's about 80%. So when you bought your smartphone, 80% of the damage has already been done. So this server is probably about 4 to 5 tons of waste, of toxic waste that it's creating as well. And 20 million of those were being destroyed every single year. And when I say destroyed, I mean destroyed. Many of them are physically, even though they're working fine, they're 2 or 3 or 4 years old, they are physically broken up for so-called security reasons and convenience. It's just easier to destroy things today than it is to fix them or repair them or extend their life, because big tech makes a lot more money out of that. It's the waste economy. How do we make things boring and old really quickly? Because if we can do that, we can make a lot more money really, really quickly. We're such clever humans at these sorts of things. So the growth of data is what drives a lot of this. And we are now into the territory of zettabytes. So that's unimaginably big. In 2010, about 2 zettabytes of data. I calculated that if you wanted to print out a zettabyte of data, you would need the paper from 20 trillion trees. So it's not possible because there's only 3.5 trillion trees left on the planet. There used to be about 5.5 trillion, but now there's about 3.5 trillion. But it gives you a sense of the scale of a zettabyte and the growth of zettabytes of data. In 2020, about 64 zettabytes, and it's going to 180 by 2025, 612, over 2,000 zettabytes of data by 2035. So that's what's produced on a yearly basis. Typically, you store about 10% of that in the process. So it's a 28% annual growth rate. And as I said, it's roughly 10% of it, but what we store, 90% of it is absolute crap. It's not used 3 months after it's first stored. So most of our data centers are really data dumps. So we're destroying the planet for waste. We are wonderful at creating dumps, and we are wonderful at creating waste, the modern humans. So just looking at the idea, if we go to 2,000 zettabytes, and it's a little over 10 years away, how many servers would we need to store about 214 zettabytes, which would be 10% of that? We need 1.6 billion servers. So we need to go from 70 million servers to 1.6. On somebody saying, oh, but we're going to innovate our way out of this. Well, we actually innovated our way into the problem. And it's highly unlikely modern humans with our current behaviors will do anything other than make the problem 100 or 200 times worse. So each one of these 1.6 billion servers with about 1.2 ton of CO2 to make each one, and 4 or 5 tons of waste, and hundreds of thousands of litres of water. A typical server will be probably 300,000-400,000 litres of water to manufacture during a water crisis, which is going to get much worse as well. And we're going to destroy about 428 million of those servers as well. So all our other devices, our wonderful smartphones, we've made 16 billion of those smartphones since 2007, designed for waste, designed to be got rid of every 2 years. The media industry is in a wonderful relationship with the technology industry, saying you deliver 8K and we'll deliver more programs for the 8K, etc. Even though the vast majority of people can't see the difference on their sizes of devices, but it's a good feature for marketing and for selling these frivolous wants that is driving us to a point of extinction. So 16 billion of these smartphones, each smartphone about 60 kg of CO2 to manufacture, 90 kg of waste, and 14,000 litres of water for each and every smartphone. So that's about 950 million tons of CO2, 1.4 billion tons of material waste, and 214 billion tons of water. Global PC sales, we're always told, oh, this will replace, oh, that's the end of the PC. Well, not quite. PCs sales have remained reasonably steady over the last 10 or 15 years, 5 billion of them. So a typical PC or laptop is about 300 kg of CO2 to manufacture, 1.2 ton of material waste, and 190,000 litres of water to make a typical PC. So 1.5 billion tons in total, 6 billion tons of material waste, and 960 billion tons of water used. And these wonderful new TVs that we have, an 86-inch or 80-inch LCD TV is probably about 2 tons of CO2 to make, with probably another 2 tons of CO2 caused by energy use over its life. So somewhere in the region of 4 to 5 tons of CO2 for that beautiful TV that we're watching this evening, and probably about 6 tons, maybe 6 to 8 tons of toxic waste to actually make this device. So most of the impact is in the physical. Digital is physical. It is extraordinarily physical. There are 125 substances in a smartphone. There's something like half of the rare earth materials in a smartphone. Electronics are extraordinarily physical. They require a huge amount of energy to make and to maintain. The internet is by far the biggest machine that humans have ever created. And what's it all for? You know, are we leading better, happier lives in the last 20 or 30 years? In 2009, US teenagers, 26% of them said they had persistent sadness. By 2021, it was 44%. And I'm sure anybody who has children will relate to these figures. Technology is always telling us, and I've been involved and I've been part of telling these stories for 25 or 30 years. Wired, I used to love reading Wired magazine back in 1997. We're facing 25 years of prosperity, freedom, and a better environment for the whole world. If you got a problem with that, the arrogance, the intense arrogance of the tech bro world in the process. Technology has never reduced CO2. Anytime we get efficiency, 1x efficiency, we get a 4x use. Uber says it's coming into the cities, it's going to reduce pollution. It increases pollution by 20% because all sorts of other factors come into play. So the technology industry is always telling us, oh yeah, all of these innovations have actually brought us to a point of extinction. And I talk to a lot of scientists on a regular basis, and most of them cannot see the human race surviving another 100 years if we keep behaving the way we are currently behaving. But we're always being sold this idea that just around the corner is the innovation. Well, innovation got us into this mess. I don't think the type and the psychology of innovation is going to get us out of it. So to give a little bit perspective of, you know, where is the damage and where is the waste occurring in a media universe, and we're all part of this media universe in this day and age. So basically there are 4 components in the data, CO2 and waste life cycle. There's the creation, there's the streaming, there's the use, and there's the storage. So there's the 4 blocks of where we can identify waste. And in the vast majority of scenarios, the waste is either going to be in the creation or in the use. And if you are dealing with popular mass media, then the vast majority of the impact is in the use. It's going to be on the user's device. It's going to be on the smartphone, on the laptop, on the TV, which the media industry has a wonderful way of saying, well, that's not our problem. You know, we're not responsible for that. Oh, that's great. We'll just focus on the things that make us look good. Well, you know, we need to focus on the areas where the actual problems are. So the vast majority of the energy and waste and CO2 will either be in the use of the media, or if it's not used that much, it'll be in the creation of the actual media. Relatively little in a typical environment, maybe 0.1% of the total will be in streaming or storage. Not to say that it's not a big issue when you scale it into the billions of actual uses, But the vast majority of what we are extremely good at doing, which is hiding the impact of our behaviors, is on the physical user device or in the creation of the environment. So I did a few calculations. I've done a good bit of research on this, and I did a few case studies. And one was creating 1,000 words of content, estimating that it took 20 hours to create on a laptop, and that the total weight of that was 5 megabytes, because let's say it had some large images, and that it was read once, and the reading time was 4 minutes to actually read it. What would be the total impact? So according to my calculations, using a laptop for an hour, the total impact of that is about somewhere in the region of 110 grams of CO2. I'm not talking about the waste, I'm not talking about the water, just focusing on the CO2 for the moment. So to create that 1,000 words on a laptop over 20 hours, about 2.3 kg. Streaming at the cost 0.03 of a gram of impact. The use 11 grams because it's 4 minutes on a user device, and assuming that the user device is a laptop. Storage relatively equivalent to the streaming in its actual cost. So there we've got 2.3 kg as an estimate of the impact of that piece of content. So and that's it being read once. Let's assume it's read 10,000 times. What does it look like? Well, it's still 2.3 to create. The streaming has gone from 0.03 to 0.3, and the use is now 114 kg out of those users' devices. So as you can see, once you get up into high numbers, the vast majority of the impact occurs on the user's device in the process. So we're talking about 116 kg in the process. So this is just a model, a way to begin to think about this problem in a true and total cost way, rather than just snipping off the elements of the equation which make us look good, which we're really good at doing as humans. Just giving a basic model, because basically weight is energy, weight is waste. So the heavier it is, the more wasteful it is in the process, more energy intense, more material intense, etc. So 1,000 words of text saved as a text file is about 6 kilobytes. Saved as optimized HTML, it's about 7 kilobytes. So the most efficient way to present data is well-written HTML. If you saved it, that 1,000 words as a Word document, it's about 16 kilobytes. If it was badly written HTML, maybe 50. PDFs, over 60. PDFs, much less efficient than HTML as a way of communicating in a sustainable manner. So we can see that. So 1,000 words of text is about 2 A4 pages. So I created 2 images, each an A4 page in size. So then we're jumping up different scales, 300 dpi JPEG, it could be a megabyte. So, we're seeing that could be 212 times. So they do see an image paints 1,000 words, but an image is much more energy intense and much more wasteful than is text. It's just to give us a scale of our impacts. So now let's move into audio. So 1,000 words is about 4 minutes of audio. So we see we're now into megabytes, and if you saved it as WAV file, it'd be 66 megabytes. So we're beginning to see the jump in scale, but it's when we come to video, we're into 55, YouTube standard 70, 110. We go to 4K, it's almost a gigabyte. We go to 8K, it's 2.4 gigabyte. And you cannot see the difference on a smartphone or a laptop from 2K upwards. But look at the scale of impact. It's all getting much worse, exponentially worse. 80% plus of the demand on the internet now is video, and it's scaling higher and higher. And this is why we are hitting all these crises, because we are producing and consuming. We are at scales that we have never, ever remotely consumed at. It's not an energy production problem we have. It's an energy consumption problem we have. And these lies we tell ourselves about green energy and renewable energy, there is no such thing as renewable energy. These solar panels are massively energy intense. These wind mills take tons and tons of copper and rare earth materials to build. And an awful lot of them are not designed to be properly recycled in any sense or word. All energy that human creates has an incredible demand, and the growth of energy is so vast that even we get more efficient energy devices such as solars, windmills, the pace at which we are using energy will mean we will be creating just as much or more damage to the climate as we move forward. So we radically, if we want to survive the next 100 years, we need to radically reduce our consumption by at least 50%. So that's not the story that I'm sure you want to hear, but that to me is the reality that needs to be told. Thank you for listening.
That was fascinating, Gerry. While I wait for Dom to come on, I mean, you didn't drown me in numbers, but there was a lot of numbers. One of them that kind of resonated with me, because I've just been working on the issue of sustainability in the home network, and so Wi-Fi. And you were saying basically 90% of a lot of things, it was the 90 that fixed me, are waste. And did you know that 90% of the energy and the CO2, well, no, 90% of the CO2 generated by Wi-Fi is pure waste, in the sense it's what we call the idle time, that basically you can't turn, when Wi-Fi is on, whether it's being used or not, it uses almost the same amount of energy. And so whatever people pay, everybody listening, what you're paying every year to your energy provider to have Wi-Fi at home, 90% of that money you're paying is for no reason whatsoever. I thought that was an interesting parallel.
Interesting.
Listen, I mean, I've written down like 5 questions. I don't think we'll have a Q&A session with you now. We'll hand over to Dom to have his response, to tell us a little bit about how these numbers talk to him when he's on the greening of streaming side of things. And so that's the thing for our audience to try and bring. And thank you, Gerry, for giving us a few 4K, 8K video examples for us to use to work with. So Dom, before we get into Q&A and a debate, do you want to take this forward a bit on the greenings, on the streaming side of things?
Yeah. So I mean, Gerry, I'm not sure if how aware you are of the organisation that I run, Greening and Streaming. We're sort of an industry association of technology vendors and service providers who kind of behind the scenes enabling all the content to get from production to consumption, sometimes embracing the consumption and more actually getting involved with production as well. But we sort of see those as slightly on the extremes of what we're doing. But that box that you have in some of your diagrams of streaming, I think that's identically my box. I have a very different view in terms of the balancing of energy, but I don't want to start sort of going into the detail of some of these numbers and it feel like I'm challenging the outright validity of the purpose of those numbers. The sentiment and the noble intent is shared. We are looking at the fact that we are an industry which is very energy hungry. And as an industry, as the streaming industry, we've historically relied on telco and data center to, if you like, deal with the energy supply problem and the fabric and the manufacture of the stuff. And we think of ourselves as software architectures who just say, I need some infrastructure, make it be, and we use it because there's people who want to watch content and turn it off when people don't want to watch content. That turning off is something that we are definitely looking deeply at. But also the understanding of what energy we're using is a big question. And as an industry, we've been retrofitting energy to the interpretation of what we do and how we design things. Until 3-4 years ago, streaming was relatively niche. Now it's the tail that wags the dog in terms of being probably the vast majority of traffic on the internet and in data centers and so on and so forth. So suddenly the streaming architects are focused, rather than on saying, hey, look at us, we can do this cool thing, use this great technology to disseminate information. Suddenly we're thinking, oh my God, they're using so much of it. It's a huge electricity bill. It's having an impact on the environment. What can we do to reduce that? And so we are setting about measuring a lot of measurement projects and a lot of proactive projects to test out things that could significantly reduce the energy. We're having conversations across the supply chain to make sure that when we're not always expecting everything to be instantly on, we can actually schedule things and turn things off when we're not using them and make better forward planning about how we're going to draw on resources and so on and so forth. Having conversations about how best to affect the consumer environment. I differ definitely from you and Ben in that I don't think the vast majority of energy is in the user environment. I think it's a lot, but it's not 0.32. I can't remember your numbers. 0.32, 20 or 30%. I think it's more like around using IEA energy figures. You've got a total of about 8% ICT, which includes telco and data center, but it also includes all the consumer equipment. And I know from the IEA figures that telco is about 3% and data centers about 2% of global final electricity supply. So I think the consumer environment is about a third, the telco distribution streaming is about a third, and the production, the encoding of the content is perhaps as much as a third. Sorry, the encoding and storage, so the origination of the content is about a third. So that's a finger in the air estimate. We are working hard to actually get the data points into the real infrastructure, because most of the accounting has been created by people who don't really understand how the infrastructure works and how it's put together. There isn't any really good measurement at the moment, and we're definitely trying to bring that up and get some accord across the industry on how that might be. But I think the one point that's most complex that we've discovered, and I look forward to discussing with you, Gerry, is as we started to do some fairly at-scale experiments, one of the problems I had was a model called data attribution. And I think the data attribution model is very well intended in as much as it helps somebody who is living in a pure software space develop some sense of responsibility for the demand for infrastructure and physical tin and all the embedded emissions and all the energy consumption that entails. And so it creates a sort of circular economy of feedback, a sense to the broadcaster, oh, you're using this much of the energy that's provisioning the telco. The problem with the data attribution model is it's been extrapolated to create a linear relationship between the gigabyte and the kilowatt, or more importantly, that then derives a linear relationship between the gigabyte and the CO and the metric ton of CO2. You can't make that correlation. It doesn't work in a linear way. There is correlation, but there is absolutely no linear way. You can't scale from one 1,000 word document up to an 8K video and correlate the carbon there. There's no, the maths was all off in that. And we've set about measuring that at scale, trying to correlate whether we can even detect an energy fluctuation around some of the largest live events that are being delivered online, big football events, big music events, and so on. And at the moment, we're struggling to spot those energy fluctuations because it's not really how a network works. A network is lit up and it streams and it uses petawatts of energy to light up. But whether you send all zeros or a mixture of zeros and ones, which is ostensibly information, the energy flow doesn't change. Sorry, the energy demand doesn't change. It also, of course, matters where you're getting that energy from. So you can't say 1 kilogram is a gigabyte of data without knowing where you're doing that processing, because it really does matter a lot depending on the tin and so on. So the sentiment behind raising these data points, I'm absolutely in coherence with you on. I think we need to redress this frivolous energy consumption. We need to look at challenging things in our industry. We talk about engagement models, advertising driven models, which, you know, they don't put the TV to sleep because they don't care if you're asleep in front of it. They want to click up the ad count because that's how they make their money. That's maybe orthogonal to, at least if not polarized to, sustainability strategy. And so there are big systemic problems in which are coming into competition when you look at energy flow and the energy demand and the economics that create a demand for it. If we could all turn everything off, I'm sure we all would in the industry. The practicality is if we all did, somebody else is going to turn it on, and if they're not nice guys, they're going to do it worse. So there is a certain degree of pragmatism that We have members who have many hundreds of millions of dollars a quarter energy bills, and they're shocking, and they really want to get those down for economic reasons and for sustainability reasons. And I think the only final point that I wanted to sort of drop in, actually two last points. One, we don't in Green Streaming talk about carbon very much because we don't really understand it. We understand kilowatt hours, and we can affect those in an operational sense. So we have lots of support and advice from Fabric, people who run data centers, people who make chips, people who make servers, to come and constantly remind us that there are embedded emissions and things that we need to think about as we change strategy within deployment of these services. But the engineers in the streaming industry can actually affect kilowatt hours by the stroke of a bit of code. And so we're taking a proactive view on reducing that operational energy, which is obviously only part of the picture. But that's, sometimes I find that some people find that a bit unexpected, that we don't tend to talk about carbon in greening and streaming because we can't do much about it. We can do a lot about watts and kilowatt hours, so we're really focusing on what we can do stuff about. The only other final nitpick, and I don't want to go into nitpicking, I think there was a slide you showed which was talking about the correlation between CO2 growth and high tech. I don't think you factored in red diesel farming, central heating and white goods. I think those are the 80% in that growth of CO2 growth. I think high tech has featured its own growth has been probably thousands of %, but I think that period of time since the 1920s actually saw its, you can look at your energy bill, it's the white goods, it's the it's heating that are the dominant problems. If I was a dictator, I would move everyone to the temperate regions and turn off the heating and the air conditioning systems, because that would instantly give us back 80% of the fossil fuel demand at least. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that one comment at the stats. But other than that, no, great presentation. Very aligned in intent. I think we just need to make sure that we don't over-egg the story and make set impossible demands when there's a lot of people who really do have a proactive will to make a difference here and now and get on with engineering that makes a difference. So I think it's really important to get a very clear picture rather than focus on the hyperbole side to get people motivated to make change. We have a lot of people making change. Now they need to feel aligned and that they're achievable goals in front of them. So
thanks, Dom. So Gerry, I don't know if you want to respond before you do, just to add to Dom's final point about heating. I don't know, Gerry, if these figures work for you, but in the study I just did in France, in French households in 2020, when electric heating is present, electric heating represents 10 times the energy consumption of everything else in the household put together, which is an interesting fact. I don't know what to do with it.
Yeah, well, maybe connect with electric cars. Yeah, just thing, Dom says, my figures are not about energy. They're about total CO2 impact. So the reason why they're so big from the user is they take into account the user's device, the manufacturing impact of the user's device. So it's not, those are not energy calculations, they're total impact. Yeah. And the total impact is, if you've got 15 billion devices, you're going to have a lot of impact. And if you've got a billion 86-inch TVs, the total impact on the climate of those is going to be much greater than
the operational energy. Yeah,
than the operational energy. So it's a calculation of total impact rather than just energy impact. And when you look at total impact, it's a much bigger, the material manufactured, etc. Those are things we just have not included in the process. But yeah, that's the only major point there.
Okay, and the other thing, just as the three of us had, or at least I had a very different view than Dom on the consumer devices in general. I wonder what your view of this is on, Gerry. Dom was saying 30, 30, 30. So it all
let's qualify that now with operational energy rather than full life cycle carbon, I think.
Yeah. Okay, let's stay with operational energy. And I've read lots of studies. I mean, I'm based in France and I do a lot of work for French organizations, so it's more French based, but I've done some of the international, and I've never seen a single. So when what you're measuring is a period of time, say 1 hour of watching Netflix. So I'm not worried about the whole ecosystem, how much to buy. I'm just that activity. I'm going to measure that activity. And I've never seen any study that measures that kind of thing that doesn't say at least 50%, and usually they're closer to 80% of the energy requirement for that is household stuff, mainly the screen, but also the home router and the Wi-Fi and stuff like that. It's I've never seen less than that. And just to round that off, the ICT study, which I mentioned at our last event, and sorry guys, I got my wires crossed. I did say 79% of ICT measurement was devices. That was correct. And I mixed the other two around. It's 5% network and 15% data center. So that's the 100%. So that's typically in that use case. We're not worrying about everything about the building, the thing. And I know this isn't a perfect situation, but at least it's something we can measure and try and agree upon. Where is the energy going? And I'm really excited to be working with the Greening of Streaming guys and Dom so that we can have some kind of convergence and see. But Gerry, question to you though. So in our industry, we're the media industry, so we have to produce content. Content then gets post-produced and it gets stored, and there's all the various parts of the workflow. And one of the big debates is, I call it the elephant in the room, and Dom gets a bit fed up with me saying that all the time, because nobody is taking responsibility for the devices under the user's control. Everybody I work with and I talk to, they're an operator, they'll worry about their network, they make content, they'll worry about the production, the thing. People's TVs in their homes, it's nobody's problem. And for us in the industry, how would you see us moving forward? Because I've been going around in circles for quite a long time on this to try and find somebody to say, okay, well, I'll take some of the responsibility. Just to give you one further thing, operators are beginning to take a little bit of responsibility for Wi-Fi. So I don't know if I think that's even the case in Ireland. I read something about Aircom doing that. So if you have a deal with them, they will come and take a bit of responsibility for how your Wi-Fi works. But if you ring Aircom or RTE and say my TV is using 150 watts of power when it should be using 75, I'm sorry, Gerry, that's nothing to do with me. So how do you think we can do? Do you think that's a good quest? We should try.
Yeah. No, it makes. But we're in this world now. I mean, this insane world where, out in the physical world, it's like, you buy, a bag of potatoes, and the supermarket tries to give you another bag of potatoes, and you say, no, I don't want, and it's, and then give you another. And before you leave the supermarket, they're not even charging you. They're trying to force you to take more products out of the supermarket. That's digital. That's the insane world that you cannot watch a video on YouTube without being super cautious to stop the next bloody video starting in the process, or to stop, or now it's Netflix. Everything is shove it down people's throats, create an addiction, keep them just about functioning as humans, and just shovel that media down their throat as fast as we can possibly shove it. And it's all getting exponentially worse. So it's very hard to see what, when the whole, and we see chat GPT, which is about a search, is about 4 to 5 times more energy intense, using the system than using, say, a typical Google in the process. And these are designed to be addictive because everybody is a target now in the media industry. All the consumer is, the whole purpose is to turn them into addicts. So how we can get out of that culture and that economics of the growth debt cult, I don't know, because it is, the more energy we get people to use, the more money we can make as an industry. It's a business model of Armageddon, and it's very difficult to see with these business models how we will survive another 50 or 100 years. Just talk to the scientists, and I talk to them on a daily basis. At the scale we are using energy and consuming materials, the planet can't deal with the extraction of a Mount Everest every year. And nobody seems to give a shit.
Yeah.
Nobody seems to give a shit in industry. It's not my problem. Nobody seems, because we're all focused on the quarter and how do we maximize that revenue in the process. And some of the times we'd say, oh, but we're doing it for our children. What legacy we are leaving our children and their children? But we can't stop because it's the business model. But we do little things on the edge to make us feel good, in the process. But the monstrous business model that is totally designed to get people to overconsume and gouge.
So in our particular case, we've got to educate towards digital sobriety. That's what's come up in a few of our...
we need to start having deep conversations, deep philosophical, looking for some wisdom in our lives.
Have you seen in any other industries, even if it's not a consumer industry, but kind of business models that are starting to exist that do address this issue of overconsumption?
Well, you see it not so much in industry. You see movements in cities of getting cars out of cities, 15-minute cities. So there are movement, the right to repair movement, which the industries have tried to destroy at every step along the way. Destroy it. Apple tried to destroy, absolutely destroy it, and yet started by communities. The more I see, the more the answer will only come from community action, because we are too and I've been part of in the industry, we're too deep in the growth debt cult.
Right.
Companies need help. They have become addicts to the business model as well. But this business model is destroying life on Earth. This is not hyperbole. If you think it's hyperbole, Dom, well and good. I don't think, and there's an awful lot of scientists, we won't survive another 100 years with this business model.
No, but I love it that you're giving a sense of direction to what could be first inklings of solutions. I'm conscious of time, so I want to ask, we have an audience question, perhaps starting with Dom and then over to Gerry, about the reducing our consumption. Okay, but what about digital elevation in other parts of the world? Dom, I think at the last reading of streaming event, that we were told there's 2 billion people that are going to be coming online in the next 10 years. Yeah. And those people, a lot of them, there's a large proportion which will be illiterate, which means that the importance of streaming and video is going to be even more important for the newcomers to online. So how do we address that?
Absolutely. This was Mei-Lin Fung, who co-founded the People-Centered Internet with Vint Cerf, one of the founders of the Internet. And this is a sort of, I think I'd lean it towards the ISOC side of the industry. So the Internet, it's not fair to call it ISOC industry, the ISOC side of the societal issues of the Internet. So they're looking at, forward planning and making sure that the Internet isn't just a hegemony of Northern Europe and North American globalization, that actually that there are the needs for the cultures where those technologies are being adopted and met. And one of the most challenging, one of the most interesting, was quite daunting for me, was that she pointed out half the world is due to come online, and they have extremely high literacy. So the only way they're going to be able to learn, to communicate, to trade, to do all of the things that are maybe part of that growth cult, I don't know, but also probably are the education to get out of that growth cult, will end up being more efficiently delivered, I think, than text has been in the literate world, if it's delivered in video. So that puts more pressure on the design of those networks. I take your point, Gerry, that in principle we'd turn it all off and get back to basics, being pragmatic. And I think we need to deal with strategies which cater for the pragmatic to be practical. Otherwise, we're just going to set ourselves at odds with each other. And you know, just to pick up on my point about hyperbole, I think the point is to actually make the engineering achievements realistic and achievable. There is, in all the academic science and all of the climate science that's been pointed at streaming over the last couple of years, as sort of in the wake of the Bitcoin mining world, it's been badly founded. It hasn't spoken to the industry. It hasn't put meters on things to actually work out what they, what energy they use operationally. And also a lot of the conjecture about system volumes and how many units are sold, they skew off, and they create this idea that we're all dead tomorrow and that there's no point in doing anything. My dad's a theologian, and he often taught me that every generation has a mortality myth. For my parents' generation, it was the Cold War. For us, it's been the pending ecological disaster and so on. And often these become an excuse to do poor. And actually, you can't do that. You have to make yourself achievable steps and step forward and do things which you can then build momentum and make real change with. If you simply point the finger and say you're wrong, there's no point, we won't get anywhere. And I think the problem with the hyperbole is it shakes people up and then it makes people feel powerless. And I think
no, but it's not. Yeah, no, I agree with. But it's not. We can do nothing. We know what to do. We don't need AI to do it. We just don't want to.
I agree. Move everyone to the temperate regions so that we're not heating houses.
No. I mean, there's
That's
massive.
what I do.
Well, maybe, you know, that is, we can do practical things as well.
I agree. We can do practical things.
Yeah, which is massively reduce our energy consumption.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. But what we need to make sure, if we start off saying it's a gazillion, and we then feel like we've halved everything, but only to actually realistically take 1% off that conjecture, we feel powerless. Whereas if we go, actually, it's only 50, and we've taken 1% off that, well, that's 5 watt reduction. We're sort of on the way. We can feel achieved, and I think we're in danger of carbon itself becoming a greenwashing tool. And I think that's really difficult. When carbon becomes so meaningless that anyone can say anything about it, it itself becomes an accounting measure that's meaningless.
Okay, agreed. But it's not carbon. It's overconsumption is the problem. I mean, that is just a symptom.
We are ultimately in violence agreement. So, yeah, for sure.
But we're in an industry. We're in an industry that is the apex of overconsumption.
Yeah, absolutely.
One final question, Gerry, from Trees, thanks to whom you're here today, because she heard you talk 3 years ago, and she has a question to you, saying you're even more passionate than you were there, but have you seen any change in awareness in the last 3 years as you've been talking about this?
I think the right to repair movement is promising and hopeful in that, you know, we see it in the European Union. We see, I think, 29 states in the United States are bringing in legislation at the moment. And that has unified tech geeks and farmers. You know, it's a kind of and it has begun from a very much a grassroots. And I think the thing that keeps me quite optimistic as well is I spoke to a material scientist a couple of years ago called Josh Lebowski, a wonderful person. And he said, I asked him, well, what can we do? What can we do from your point of view? And he says, well, there's 2 things. There's one scientifically, it's material simplicity. He said, if we can, our products are vastly too complicated materials-wise, which means they're almost impossible to reuse and recycle. And we could design much more materially simpler products, and we'd lose a little bit at the edges, but we'd have a vastly greater chance of creating a circular economy if we designed with a lot greater material simplicity. And then he says the second thing is social. He says all the great movements, because he's a historian as well, he says everything that has ever mattered to people in society began from communities. It was never given by governments, and it was never given by industry. So everything that matters the right to vote, a decent working week, healthcare, etc. It all began with community activism.
Okay.
It all began at a base. So I think community activism gives me hope.
Well, that's a great way to end this first hour, because we've had multiple events turning around that thing that we have to create this again in the media industry that we're part of. So creating that kind of to try and educate people towards that and have it come from the people. We can't just decide it outside from the outside because of the business constraints.
Great stuff. Thanks, Ben.